Estimating for a web build can be pretty tricky to do because there's quite a lot of different factors there that we have to take into account prior to actually beginning the build. A good place to start always is just figuring out what kind of rapport we have with our clients and get that relationship and see exactly who we're dealing with. Some clients, the web project is landed on just a single point of contact and they've got their own day job to do, so whenever they're replying to us, it's a case of they've got to feedback that replies in their meetings in between their own work. Alternatively, it could be a case of they're reporting back to a committee of people. They have to go back to the committee, arrange a meeting to discuss things, finalise things before they can then feed back to us. So it can be quite time consuming. It's not unreasonable for the client to want to do that, but it does just add on that a little bit of communication time that we've got to take into account when we're building the project. The other thing we need to take into account is having a look at the functionality of the design and liaising with the designer and the client to see what exactly they expect from the design. Some designs are quite flat, some are built using tools like Adobe XD or Figma, so you can see a bit of that functionality, but they never get the full extent of how exactly that website will operate when you've got it built and live within a browser. By discussing with the designer what their expectant functionality was and the client what they would like to see, it just gets things ironed out. So we might have ideas for one thing, but then when we go back to the client, they could say, well, I prefer this bit to be a slider, I'd like these bits to scroll in from the side as you're scrolling down the page. Whilst it is kind of simple day-to-day things that we do, it does add all adds on that time to the project, because we've then got to take into account for conflicts within the code and making sure that everything works seamlessly together and doesn't add on ridiculous page speed to it. At the end of the day, we just want to have a nice slick experience for the end user. So anything we can do to help mitigate against that is always going to be a bonus at the start. The other thing that we'd probably like to do is try and split the designs down into chunks. Whilst we might just have it for internal use, the client might not be interested in knowing how much each chunk would cost, but we could say that getting the actual sort of menu and header area would cost us this much, and then building a contact page would cost that. It does allow us to then provide that breakdown to the client that they can see exactly where the time's going, and if need be, it lets them possibly make adjustments to elements of the design if they think, oh, okay, that's costing that much. It doesn't really need to be there, so let's reduce some of the functionality there. The other thing we've got to take into account is the responsive nature of websites. A lot of designs, you'll see the desktop design and you'll maybe see a mobile version of it as well. And these days, there's so many different screen sizes that you have to ensure that you have the website looking great for all of them. So we need to take that into consideration when we're actually developing the site, of how it will work and shrink down into the different sizes. So for example, we're working on a client website just now, and it's got lots of different modules where there's videos overlaying onto images, and there is some parallax on it, so things will move in as you're scrolling down, and it looks absolutely stunning on a desktop. But we've now got to take that into account for the mobile version of how we can retain that stunning look whilst also keeping the functionality there. It takes a little bit of thought, because you can't just have everything overlapping, otherwise you won't be able to see half of it. So we've got to figure out the new positions for it while still retaining that original look and feel of the desktop design that the client kind of saw and fell in love with. So overall, there's quite a few different elements there, but the main ones is the client comms, just figuring out how the best lines of communication and the relationship with the client, making sure that we understand the expectations from the client for the design against our own expectations for the functionality and how it all operate, making sure that we break the design down into manageable chunks so we can come up with a realistic price for each chunk, and it just gives us a more honest price at the end of the day rather than pulling figures out of the air. And taking into account the responsive nature of websites and making sure that we figure out how it's going to change sizes in a natural motion and not lose anything when we put it live.